Want to use a PGR in your cereals but have no time for a separate pass? Manipulator PGR can be applied as early as one tiller. Just add it to your herbicide to reduce lodging, increase harvest efficiency, and maximize yields. Talk to your retailer for more info and to confirm acceptable tank mixes.
And welcome back to Real Ag Radio. You know, one of the big stories that is definitely taking up, well, a lot of discussion in hallways and meeting rooms is what is happening with avian influenza, HPAI, as it relates to cattle. This is, of course, something that the poultry industry has been dealing with for a number of years. But we have been finding it in the U.S. in a number of different dairy herds. The U.S. working very proactively, trying to get a better handle and understanding around this issue. Here to talk about it from a Canadian cattle perspective, of course, is Dennis Laycraft. He's Executive VP at the Canadian Cattle Association. Dennis, great to chat with you again.
Yeah, great to visit again, and good morning.
Yeah. So, Dennis, and I think that is important to say that we're recording this on Friday morning because this is a very, very fluid situation. So good job there. Okay. This week we saw, as of April 29th, Canada is going to begin to require testing of lactating dairy animals coming into Canada. That feels like a heightened level of concern here. What was your thoughts as you saw that release from CFIA?
Well, it sort of patterns what you're seeing USDA now put in place for requirements for interstate and international movement, and many of the US states. And in the US, their animal health system is a little different. The individual states actually have a fairly significant role in all of the intra activity there. So it's a little different. CFIA has a more overreaching role in Canada, but it's consistent with what the U.S. is doing, and I think it probably makes good sense. Our guidance would have been that anyone who was importing or bringing a new lactating dairy cow in, probably first of all they have to come with a veterinary certificate, so that's already part of the practice if you're importing those animals. But it's just good sense to test them to make sure that they're healthy animals and you're not bringing anything into your herd.
Yeah. Is from a beef industry perspective, like a lot of people have, of course, they're finding it in dairy herds, but which Holsteins are obviously a major part of from a breed perspective. But we've seen a lot of Holsteins crossed into the beef industry or just feeding straight Holsteins over the number of years. From a testing perspective, should more testing be happening from your thought on more on the beef chain as well, and not so much focus on dairy? Or what's your thoughts on that?
Right now, all of the work that's been done in the United States, and there's been a lot going on. It's been over a month actually since a lot of this started to take place, and it's for whatever reason, it certainly seems that this particular virus reproduces in the mammary area. So, it's lactating cows is where you're likely to see the replication. And they have tested their beef animals in proximity. All those tests have come back negative. They're continuing to monitor that. But right now, it certainly appears from everything that they've identified that the real risk is in lactating cows. And obviously, in this case, it's lactating dairy cows where it has been found. So there's certainly no reason, and WOA, again, likewise, providing guidance, the World Organization for Animal Health, that there shouldn't be any unnecessary additional restrictions put in place. And right now, I think the testing requirements are where are placed where they are going to be most effective. There doesn't seem to be any value in testing young animals at this stage.
Yeah.
What they will do if you've got an infected herd, they're going to want the herd to be clear before animals are leaving there. So again, that's taking, a focused approach. This is what we do know about this particular pathogen in cattle is that the duration of the illness is relatively short. So to date, knock on wood, there's been no mortalities associated with it. What is, the concern is, um, there it is highly pathogenic to poultry.
Yeah.
And, it's certainly there's some other species where it is even, there's still research going on. There was one human illness associated, sort of a conjunctive eye infection. So again, nothing that was particularly serious, but you always take those things, look at those very carefully. And, with the amount of resources going in, USDA is looking at this, I think, as thoroughly as they can. And, I think they're issuing pretty responsible guidance right now.
And they also not only testing beef cattle around those infected dairy herds, but also reported this week that they've also done testing on ground beef produced as well through PCR testing and finding no positive results there as well, which of course that is a massive relief. Which is similar to the testing of pasteurized milk and pasteurization, taking care of the virus as well. So all of that is really good news. Of is why we haven't seen a positive animal in Canada. Why not? Do you have a good understanding from CFIA why we're not testing or maybe following a parallel testing regime to the US, or do I have that, or maybe we are and I have that wrong?
Well, they have been issuing guidance, and the way our surveillance works in Canada is we rely very heavily on our our practicing veterinarians. So there's been guidance, and this is, through the bovine practitioners and through the Veterinary Medical Association and they're working with the provincial chief veterinary officers. So there's a requirement in Canada. They're monitoring for illness if they see any symptoms, and they're being asked to test, and if it does come back positive, there's a requirement to report that. So it is part of our regular surveillance system that we do look for it. So I wouldn't say that there isn't any surveillance going on. There's actually a heightened awareness of this, and there's a deliberate activity to look for any symptoms that could be consistent with this. So we're monitoring it, and I think the reality is, as the poultry industry has found with migratory birds, they're going to fly north in spring and fly south in the fall. So they deal with kind of this twice a year. So, to us, we're putting in place a lot of kind of reinforced messaging around just good biosecurity. If you find dead birds on your farm or ranch, first of all, you should take your own, precautions, how you handle those, how you dispose of them. And just likewise, anytime you bring new animals onto your place, there's some protocols that are good practices to follow. So we're looking not just at the surveillance side, but all of the best management practices around this. And historically, Canada's done a very good job around those things when you look at experiences around the world.
Yeah, and what's different from a biosecurity standpoint here, like think about a hog operation or poultry which has been really devastated in many ways by strains of this virus. It's inside. It's like you can go full biosecurity lockdown, right? In a poultry operation. On a ranch, that's a much different situation. Which, and I had asked a number of people, when I saw some of the interstate restrictions happening in the US, I was like, man, does it feel like we're kind of getting out ahead of ourselves? Or like I was kind of questioning why such an aggressive protocol on some of the movement of cattle, given the fact that, like you said, cattle don't stay sick very long. definitely impacts the output of the milk, and that's how it was originally detected, of course, because people are checking those volumes on a daily basis. But it actually is about the birds, is what a lot of people have told me, and cattle being essentially a carrier, or lack of a scientific term, a host, for the issue, because it does impact birds in a far worse way. Is that how you read the aggressiveness of some of the protocols?
Well, it's first of all, it's still a relatively new infection in cattle.
Yeah,
So, you're going to exercise more caution as you get to know what we're dealing with moving forward. And, there's certainly been no indication, when cattle are out, and you mentioned the ranch environment. Well, they're, generally spread out over large areas. That's probably the least likely place
yeah.
you're going to find infected animals. And with obviously it's very significant for poultry. It can impact some other species as well. So I think anytime you have something like this, and that there are practices you can undertake, and it is, there's kind of two beliefs on how it's been moving in the US. There's a lot of movement of dairy cows interstate, lactating dairy cows. And so there was mechanical transmission, which, largely milking machines. And, I wasn't aware, but, some of these cows are milked on route. And, that's, yeah, for, the comfort of the animals is they're doing that. And then there's some question about the spread as a result of migratory birds moving forward. So, as we're looking at it, I think, in reality, they've taken a fairly measured approach. They're looking at, we know it's been detected in dairies. It can spread through the movement of dairy animals. They've confirmed that down there. So, I think they're focusing in on the right things.
Yeah, there's like this balance of like, trying to do the right things, not getting, being overly cautious, but still being cautious and being proactive. Like there's a whole balancing act that's going on here that it's some really tough decisions. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the fact that before we wrap up is, my mind keeps leaping back to 2003 and some of the beef industry's PTSD around BSE. Not to joke about PTSD, but it's the best way to describe how that impacted the industry, for sure. That for me, Dennis. Avoiding any sort of a border restriction, border closure is all for the beef industry specifically, that that you're focused on. That has to be in the back of your mind, is it not?
Well, I mean, we always take animal health seriously. We make a major investment in Animal Health Canada. In fact, our chief veterinary officer is the co-chair
Yeah.
of Animal Health Canada. But when you're this is an influenza, so it is quite different from what we're looking at. And it is going to move around the world, with migratory birds. So WOA has been pretty clear that, with their guidance not to be putting any unnecessary trade restrictions. So this one is very different from what we were dealing with there, and very different from something like African swine fever or foot and mouth. But, as we continue to talk about biosecurity, that's helpful to actually make sure that we're being very vigilant against other diseases that might present that type of risk. So, we continue to work on that. That's why we make such an investment in animal health every year through the Canadian Cattle Association, and work and constantly, engage with our counterparts around the world, and why we have such a tight relationship in North America on dealing with these. And when we are working on these, we'll be participating in the WOA meetings that are coming up the end of May. Those take place every year in Paris. We have a trilateral meeting coming up in just over 2 weeks with the US and Mexico, where we'll talk about this. And, preparation is always an important thing around this, to make sure that, we have the confidence, particularly in North America, that we just have a rational approach around all of these things.
Hey, Dennis, really do appreciate it. Thank you so much for talking about this issue. I know it's a very, very heavy one, and one that I am sure there is a lot of discussions happening behind the scenes, and I appreciate you being here today to discuss it with us. So thanks so much.
Yeah, you're very welcome, and have a great weekend.